Welcome to lesson 11. In this lesson, let us discuss about Kepler's law of planetary motion. Prologue. The Sun occupies the central position in the universe. Planets revolving around the Sun. In this lesson, we shall discuss about Kepler's law. First law of Kepler is the law of orbits. Each planet moves in an elliptical orbit with the Sun at one focus. Here diagram is given. See, A is a planet revolving around the Sun. Position P of the planet where it is close to the Sun is known as perigee. Position Q of the planet where it is farthest from the Sun is known as apogee. Video is given here. Please watch.
Kepler's first law, which is popularly known as law of orbits. Why is it called law of orbits? We'll see that in some time once we know what is Kepler's first law. Kepler's first law stated that the orbit of any planet is an ellipse around the Sun with Sun at one of the two foci of the ellipse. That means, as I told you in the previous slide, that it was proposed in a theory by Copernicus that the planets revolve around the Sun in circular orbits. But Kepler in his first law told that it is true that planets revolve around the Sun, but it is not in a circular orbit. Instead, it revolves around the Sun in an ellipse. I hope you all are aware of what is an ellipse. An ellipse is a geometrical figure similar to this. And Sun is located at one of the two foci of the ellipse. So in ellipse we have two focus, F1 and F2, right? So this law stated that the planets revolve around the Sun and the Sun is situated at one of the focus. So it is something like this. Let us suppose this is the Sun, this is the Earth. So the Earth revolves in an elliptical orbit and the Sun being situated at one of the focus. So not only Earth, even the other planets, they revolve around the Sun in an elliptical orbit. So when I'm talking of ellipse, I hope you are already aware of the geometrical terms related to ellipse which you have studied in your mathematics, but still just a quick review to remind you. If this is our ellipse, this is F1, this is F2, these are the two foci of the ellipse. This axis is known as the major axis. Let us suppose we call it AB. Let us suppose we call it CD. So in this case, AB is the major axis of the ellipse. CD is the minor axis of the ellipse. So when let us suppose if this point is O, if I say OB, OB is nothing but semi-major, that is half of the major axis. So OB is semi-major axis, OA is semi-major axis. Similarly, OC and OD are semi-minor axis. Because we'll quite often will come across such terminologies like semi-major axis of the ellipse or major axis of the ellipse. So I just reviewed the same. Now we'll see how can we compare Kepler's first law with the Copernicus model. As we saw, Copernicus told that this is the Sun and the planets revolve in circular orbit. But Kepler said that it is not circular, instead it is an ellipse. So these two theories, do they contradict each other? No, they don't, because circle is nothing but a special case of ellipse. So we can say that what Copernicus suggested was not incorrect, but then he did not give a general explanation for all the orbits. He only spoke about one special case, because circle is just a special case of ellipse. So in general, Kepler's law stated that all the planets revolve in an elliptical orbits. Now let us come to the first question. In the first slide, I told that this is also called law of orbits. I hope now it is clear to you why it is called law of orbits. Because in this law, it talks about the orbital motion of the planet. It talks about which kind of orbit does the planets follow to revolve around the Sun. That is why it is known as law of orbits. So what happens when, as I told you, the circle is a special case of ellipse. So what happens, how does a circle comes out of an ellipse? An ellipse, as I told, it has two focus. When it becomes a circle, the two focus of the ellipse merges, and which is known as the center of the circle. And the semi-major axis which we define for an ellipse becomes the radius for the circle. That means this semi-major axis, this part becomes the radius of the circle, and the two focus combines and becomes the center of the circle. So I hope Kepler's first law is now clear to you and its relation to Copernicus model. Now we'll go ahead and study Kepler's second law.
Second law of Kepler is the law of areas. The line joining the sun and the planet, that is radius vector, sweeps out equal areas in equal interval of times. Diagram is given beautifully. You can see areas A1 and A2 are swept by the radius vector in equal times. Planet covers unequal distance S1 and S2 in equal time. This is due to the variable speed of planet. When the planet is closest to the sun, it covers greater distance in a given time. Hence, speed is maximum at closest position. Speed is minimum at the furthest position. Proof for the law of areas. That means Kepler's second law. Consider a planet moving from A to B. Radius vector OA sweeps a small angle d theta at center in a small interval of time dt. From figure AB equal to r d theta, the small area dA swept by the radius is dA equal to half into r d theta. Divide by dt on both sides. dA by dt equal to half into r square into d theta by dt. dA by dt equal to half r square omega, where omega is a angular velocity. Angular momentum L equal to m r square omega. Hence r square omega equal to L by m. Hence dA by dt equal to half L by m. Angular momentum is conserved. Hence dA by dt equal to constant. That is, area swept by the radius vector in unit time is the same. Video is given here. Please watch it.
Second law is more popularly known as law of areas. Why? Because this law stated the line joining a planet to the sun sweeps out equal areas in equal intervals of time. What does that mean? That means whenever the first law clarified the fact that the planet will revolve in an elliptical orbit. The second law stated that the area covered by the planet while revolving around the sun will be equal in equal intervals of time. That means the rate of change of area with time will be constant. Let us suppose here we see that this is the sun located at the focus, and this is a planet which is revolving around the sun. Let us suppose I consider an instant from where it starts revolving. Let us suppose this position is P1. It reached P2. So when it traveled from P1 to P2, so what is the area swept in traveling from P1 to P2? This area, right? Now again, the same planet will keep revolving. It will come to some other point, let us say P3. Again, it will keep going and it will reach some point, say P3. And again, it will go on and on. So again, in this case, for when it traveled from P3 to P4, the area covered is this area. So according to the second law, it says that the area traveled in moving from P1 to P2, let us suppose this time taken to go from P1 to P2 is delta t. Again, time taken from going from P3 to P4 is again delta t. So the area traveled in this case will be equal to the area traveled from P3 to P4. That means in equal intervals of time, it will travel, it will cover or it will sweep out equal areas. So that was what was proposed in the second law, and that is why this law was known as the law of areas, because this law talked about the areas covered by the planet while revolving around the sun. Let us suppose that the position and momentum of the planet is denoted by r and p respectively. R is for position and p is for momentum. Right. Now, what would be the area covered by the planet in time delta t? As you can see here, I say that the planet moves from P1 to P2 in time delta t. So what would be the area covered by the planet in this time? That means what is this area? So let us denote that by delta A. So this area will be half into r, where r denotes the position of this planet, as I already told. So half into r into the distance which it travels here. Right. Now let us say that the velocity of the planet is v. If the velocity of the planet is v, then this distance which it travels from P1 to P2 in time delta t will be v into delta t. So this would be v into delta t. So we can say that the area traveled, that is this area, would be equal to half into r into v into delta t. So we are using simple mathematics here. So from this we can say delta A by delta t is equal to half r cross v, because we are dealing with all vectors. These are all vector quantities. Right? Now this we can write as, we already know that momentum is equal to mass into velocity. Right? So we can say velocity is nothing but momentum divided by mass. So if we do that, mass being a constant quantity, it will come out. So this would be r cross p. Now what is r cross p? That is the cross product of the position vector and the momentum vector. That is nothing but L, where L is the angular momentum. So L is the angular momentum. When I talk of P, P is the linear momentum. So this is L by 2m. Now L by 2m is equal to constant for any central force. What is a central force? Any force which is directed towards the center. So in this case also, when the planet is moving around the sun, the force which is acting on the planet is towards the sun. So that is a central force. So for any central force, the total angular momentum remains constant. The angular momentum for any central force is constant. So that is a basic principle. So using that, we find that delta A by delta T is equal to constant. That means the area covered with time is equal to constant. That is, equal areas will be covered in equal intervals of time, and that is what the second law states. So we'll quickly review this derivation once again. Let us suppose this is the sun. This is the position of the sun, and let us suppose any planet was initially at P1. It traveled a distance and reached P2 in time delta t. So how much distance did it cover along this path? It is v into delta t, if v is the velocity of the planet. Let us suppose the position is denoted by r. So what would be the area covered from P1 to P2? It would be half into r into v delta t. Right? We know that linear momentum P is equal to mass into velocity. So we replaced velocity with P divided by m. So from there we found that delta A by delta T, that is rate of change of area with time, is equal to L by 2m, where L is a constant for any central force. Therefore, we observe delta A by delta T is constant. That is, equal areas will be traversed in equal intervals of time. So we covered Kepler's first law and second law. Now we'll go ahead and see what does Kepler's third law.
Next one is Kepler's third law, that is the law of periods. The square of the period of revolution of a planet around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance between the planet and the sun. That is, t square is directly proportional to r cube. T square by r cube equal to constant. Proof for the law of periods. Consider a planet P of mass m moving with velocity v around the sun of mass m in a circular orbit of radius r. The diagram is given. See, F equal to g mm by r square, which is equation number 1. The centripetal force is F equal to mv square by r, which is equation number 2. Equating two forces, one equal to 2. mv square by r equal to g mm by r square. In this equation, m and r are cancelled. V square equal to gm by r. Equation number 3. If t be period of revolution of planet, v equal to 2 pi r by t. Equation number 4. Substituting 4 in 3. 4 pi square r square by t square equal to gm by r. Finally, r cube by t square equal to gm by 4 pi square. Gm is a constant for any planet. Hence, t square is directly proportional to r cube. Video is given here. Please watch.
Kepler's third law is popularly known as the law of periods. This law states that the square of the time period of a planet is directly proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis of the orbit. What does that mean? Let us suppose that any planet is revolving. Let us suppose Earth is revolving around the sun. Now the time period of the planet, that is the time period of Earth, that is the time it takes to complete one revolution around the sun, the square of that time period, let us say t square, is directly proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis of the orbit. I already told you, when I talk of semi-major axis, which distance do I mean? I mean to say this distance, half of the major axis. So this time period of the planet, square of the time period of the planet is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. Let us suppose if I denote semi-major axis with A, if this is the semi-major axis, then t square is proportional to A cube. So here also we'll go ahead and derive Kepler's third law to show that how can we prove that this law holds true. And you are also aware why is it called law of periods? Because it talks about the relationship or the dependency of time period of a planet. That is why it is known as the law of periods. Now we'll see how can we derive and prove the universality of Kepler's third law. Let us suppose the mass of the planet is denoted by, we are denoting small m as the mass of planet. And let us suppose we denote mass of sun by capital M. Now remember Newton's universal law of gravitation. What did it say? If this is your sun and let us suppose this is the planet which is revolving around the sun, so there has to be a force of gravitation between the planet and the sun. What is that force of gravitation? That is g into m1 m2 by r square, right? So let us say g into m1 m2 divided by r square. Let us say the distance between the planet and the sun is r. So this will be r square. At the same time, since it is moving in an elliptical orbit, there has to be a centripetal force which helps the planet to move around the sun in a circular path, right? So that centripetal force would be nothing but mv square by r. Now, since the planet is moving around the sun in a stable orbit, that means these two forces are balancing each other. So this force due to gravitation should be equal to this centripetal force. So F should be equal to Fc. So if we equate the values, we get gmm by r square should be equal to mv square by r. This m and this m will get cancelled. One r this side and this r will also get cancelled. So we get gm by r is equal to v square. Now what do you think would be v? What is velocity of the planet? Velocity is nothing but the distance traveled by the planet divided by time taken. So what do you think would be the distance traveled? It would be nothing but the circumference of the circle. Please remember that in this case, in order to derive Kepler's third law, we have made this assumption. That the planet is moving in a circular path. As I already told you, circular path is a special case of ellipse. So in this case, we are taking this assumption into consideration and trying to prove the truth of the law. Therefore, if I talk of the velocity of the planet, it would be the circumference of the path divided by time taken. So that would be 2 pi r divided by time taken. That is the time period, that is 2 pi r by t. Therefore, v square would be equal to 4 pi square r square divided by t square. Now we put this value in this equation. So we will get gm by r is equal to 4 pi square r square divided by t square. So from here we can see t square is equal to 4 pi square divided by gm into r cube. So very clearly you can see that this is a constant quantity because mass of the sun is constant, capital G is the universal gravitational constant, and 4 pi square is definitely a constant. So this entire thing is a constant. So this proves that t square is proportional to r cube. So r, what was r in this case? R was nothing but the radius of the circle. And I also mentioned you before that a circle is a special case of ellipse whose radius is equal to the semi-major axis of the ellipse. That means when the semi-major axis, when an ellipse converts into a circle, the semi-major axis becomes the radius. That means if I talk of a circle, then t square is proportional to r cube, where r is the radius of the circle. So when I talk of an ellipse in general, for ellipse, t square would be proportional to a cube, where a is the semi-major axis. So in this case, what our idea was basically to prove the truth of this law for a circle, and then analogous to this, we proved it for ellipse. We said that since it is true for circle, so it would be true for the ellipse. That is what we did here, right? So basically what we did, since a planet is moving in a circular path around the sun, therefore the centripetal force acting on the planet and the gravitational force acting on the planet should be equal. So from that equality itself, we derived that t square is proportional to r cube when we talk of a circle. And when we talk of an ellipse, the radius of the circle is nothing but the semi-major axis of the ellipse. So t square is proportional to a cube.
In addition, points to remember is given. There are some points were given. Please go through it for your further knowledge. Followed by evaluation part is there. Some of the questions were asked. You can answer them carefully. Thank you.